Okay, thanks for that great introduction and for your speech as well. And let's discuss in the next minutes about the turning point from nightmare to dreams, maybe. And I would like to start with a more general question, because if we talk about the digital future, we're talking about the Silicon Valley, and we're talking about the tech giants in China like Baidu and Tencent and so on. We're not talking about Europe, just a little. So has Europe already lost the global race on technologies? And what would you say?
Well, no, certainly not. Although I think we do need to recognize that we have failed in an area of scaling up companies, okay? We have plenty of good startups in Europe, but we have few scale-ups. If you look at the last really truly sizable digital company that was created in Europe, it was SAP in the year 1972. So I say this is not good enough, okay? And I think here we really need to understand that in the first wave of digital advancement, we really were too slow. We were too hesitant for good reasons, as it turns out, because we see today that indeed technologies can be misused.
Yes.
But I say what is different now is a true realization that because these technologies have now been misused, and we see the downside, this can be the opportunity for Europe this time around to create a third wave of digital advancement that is more human-centric, that has better ethical safeguards. And I think here that really creates maybe also a new purpose that Europe can engage with. Because if I look to the United States, usually digitalization just means privatization. If I look at China, I see mass surveillance. Neither one of these are really that attractive for Europe. So it's for us to not only complain about what we see, but to do it better. And I think it can give new purpose to us, and I think the Europeans can do it.
Okay, that's pretty optimistic. Markus, what would you answer to that question? Are we good, but not good enough, or is the race lost?
I think the foundation we have created based on our value set, also what we were hearing earlier from Mr. Weber, I think is a great basis, because I think we shouldn't try to catch up or to run behind China or the US. I think we need to make our own way and go our own way. And clearly, it's important to use transparency. Transparency about data and privacy is a value that we have in Europe, and make the best out of it. Because all the services, and we're hearing this morning about health, I think transparency and privacy will be a key part in order to succeed in that area. And we need to act according to the rules that we have given. Let me give an example. Telefonica Deutschland tried to implement 6 years ago a service about geodata. And the rules were absolutely in line with law, but about the transparency, how we deal with the data, about anonymization was missing. And insofar, we created a huge shitstorm. I think we improved now. The platform is still in law and full compliant, but at the end of the day, to take these values about transparency and privacy is a good starting base. Clearly, we also need a great infrastructure, and this is where we are lagging behind a little bit. I think we need to learn from other parts of the world that we allocate spectrum to the markets without huge and expensive auctions that allow the companies to invest, because the basis of everything is the key infrastructure. We need the best fiber and mobile infrastructure in Europe in order to benefit from all the possibilities and opportunities ahead of us.
Yeah, we will talk about infrastructure later. So, Francesca, what is your point of view on that question?
I think we have to be ambitious. So I think what I lack
Are we ambitious enough?
No, I think we have to be more ambitious. So I think I totally agree that, well, regulation is important. And we are seeing now that probably Europe is the only region that has really a digital framework and a human-centric rights-based framework. And we do have good competition policy, antitrust, the digital tax, digital trade. I think we are proposing a framework, and nobody else is doing that. But I think that, for instance, privacy, data sovereignty, rights is not only our values, is our competitive advantage. So I think that we have to go beyond regulation and proposing European infrastructure, taking back democratic control over platforms and data, and making sure that we serve the people. So I really like in the speech that we go beyond technology. So I manage one of the biggest European cities when it comes to smart cities.
Barcelona.
Barcelona, and I have to explain to our citizens that this is not a technocratic project. It is not about more sensors, the blockchain, AI only. It is about really now entering into healthcare, decarbonization, education, mobility, housing. So this is the European social model. And what is our European model in the age of digitalization? And that's where really we have to be more ambitious, because we have to make sure that we can serve society, so that we are building a digital future that will empower people and will be more egalitarian. And just the last point about democracy. I mean, really, is under threat. So we see it every day because we have to talk to citizens, and they lost trust. They lost trust in public institutions, they lost trust in the system, and then we have the rise of the populist right-wing or nationalism. So we have to stop that, and we have to understand that our liberal democracy is in danger, and I see that on social platforms all the time. Now we have elections. What we do in Barcelona is we built a democratic platform for citizen participation. Over 400,000 citizens use that to interact with the city hall. 70% of the proposals we run in government come from citizens. We have to do that at European scale.
Ulrich, yes, great. Ulrich, Wilhelm, how much do you fear that Europe could lose the global race and future technologies? From your perspective?
It might well happen if we are not ambitious enough. I really support your concept. We should go far beyond regulation. Regulation is needed, and Europe has really set the pace in a couple of hotspots like data protection, which is good, I think. But we should really come to a, let's say, a whole ecosystem, a digital infrastructure, you might put it, that enables new products, that enables progress, that enables to realize our values. And if I look at the university, at this huge potential of great engineers that we have, great students, they're all around there. I think if we really could come up with a vision, there would be thousands who would follow this, and Europe is not the place where it's just all happening on one spot. But what we need is a network. Many countries, many cities, many different ways to do it, but following one idea. And there, I think much can be achieved in the next couple of years. And it should be achieved. Otherwise, we might really lose the race.
We are not ambitious enough, Manfred Weber, is that right?
We are too slow, I would say. Ambition is there. I would say there is a lot of understanding for what is needed, but we are too slow as Europeans, especially on the European level, because we have from the decision-making process too much problems inside of our institutions. That's why one of the ideas of 2019 is, because it is a year for the direction of Europe, in which direction Europe would go. The question of populism, nationalism, extremism is back. It is a question on the table. Brexit is the key, let me say, example for this, but it's not only Brexit. It's all over Europe. The people who tell, the politicians who tell the people that don't believe in Europe, believe in your nation, it's the only way to survive in a globalized world, that thinking is back. That's why that is a key year for us. And in this year, we have to give a good outlook, what can we achieve together. I said it in this cancer argument, or we have to look for examples where people say, but that's a great idea, and where people immediately understand that just thing is only possible together. None of our countries can do this alone.
But do you have the impression that people believe in you, believe in politicians?
I see a lot of eyes at the moment when I'm traveling around, when I'm doing my campaign for the moment. I see a lot of eyes who are interested, who are listening. People look for the future. They are interested for the future. They want to have an idea for what is ahead of us. And if we can give a good answer, then they are ready to accept this. Again, I would say it's an historic battle ahead of us. So whether we can win it, the negative, let me say, concern, fear-orientated way in politics, and that means also against innovation, fears are against innovation, or the more optimistic, the more positive thinking that together we can achieve a lot, we can make the world a better place. And these are the two concepts which are probably on the field of yes or no to innovation on the table, but which are also on a higher stage on the table when it is about the future of this continent, whether we work together or not. And that is about 2019 now.
We're talking a lot about dreams and visions for Europe, and in a more concrete way, would you say we need a digital master plan for Europe to convince people? And what would it be about, that master plan? Is it about AI, is it about robotics? Where could Europe be world class?
Well, first we should focus on where we are already in the lead. Huh? And when I see, for example, that the manufacturers in the European Union, especially when we are here in Bavaria, we have BMW, we have Audi, we have strong companies in this field, very competitive companies on mobility.
And a big diesel crisis among them.
Diesel crisis, yes, you're right. That's why we should focus first of all on our today's key industries for Europe, where we are already strong. And on this base, we should build up, let me say, the next step in these fields. And we shouldn't be naive, because we see also a lot of investors coming from all around the world, especially from China, who have an interest about our technologies, about our innovations. And that's why, yes, I'm in favor of trade. I'm a person who was always voting for trade agreements with Canada, with Japan a few weeks ago. But I'm not only in favor of trade, I want to have also protection of our single market in the key industries. We should be ready for trade, but we shouldn't be naive in this.
And what would you say?
Yes, you remind me of something that I have said to President Juncker from the very beginning. There is no digital economy. The economy is digital. This is why I would actually be against a digital master plan, because it would give the illusion that somehow digital here and everything else is over here. This is outdated thinking. And I really think we need to understand that for Europe's industrial base, the adoption and diffusion of digital technologies is a matter of survival. China's Made in China 2025 is a full frontal assault on our leadership in digital, in industry, apologies. So we need to understand that others are catching up. And I do hope it gives us the sense of urgency to act. I mean, this is really, it's 5 minutes to midnight. And this is why I would prioritize going forward adoption and diffusion of digital technologies. I think this is so important. If you look in Europe and you see that only about 10% of SMEs actually work with big data, and only 25% of the large companies work with big data, I say that's not good enough. So we can have the greatest AI strategy. But realistically, this is the pool of companies that can even do AI, because you need the data for it. So that's why I'm saying regulation, yes, and all the other issues, but adoption and diffusion, we've been too slow. We need benchmarks, we need incentives for companies to do this, and we need to finally get serious about digital skills. I've been hearing about digital skills for 10, 15 years, and I'm tired of it. Why is it so hard to finally make some advances in this area? I just don't understand. It should be a no-brainer. Why are we so slow about it? Because we are smart. We are innovative. You said it. But why don't we understand how important this is? We can only shape the future if we're part of it, if we have companies that play in this field, if we have people who are knowledgeable enough. And this is maybe the last thing I will say. I completely, everything we've done on data privacy was excellent, because we had an early foresight essentially on how digital technologies could be completely abused. So kudos to the Europeans for that. But the flip side to that is data security, where I don't think we have nearly paid enough attention, because you can have the best data privacy, but if you don't have the data security, it's useless if you're hacked. So I think here we need to really think about 5G, we need to think about cybersecurity in ways we've never done to date. And let me say, go on to the point that Franziska made, this is now not only about economy. What we're seeing is that Europe's slowness in adopting digital technologies now has real spillover effects on security, on defense, on sovereignty, on autonomy. So the issues we're talking about here are not just about economy. It is much, much more. It's essentially about our ability to shape our future.
Good, thanks. Marcus, would you agree to that we don't need a digital master plan for Europe, so we have to do it in a better way, in another way, like Anne said?
Absolutely agree. I think we shouldn't hide behind a plan that might come or not come. I think we need to do the right things fast. And I think let me make this a little bit more concrete, because I think we have in Germany a workforce of 10,000 people, and they're all in the mid-age, and I think to make them, educate them to work with data, because in the company we have tons of data. We liberalize the data so everybody has access to the data, but to educate employees that they are not scared about data, because based on facts you take decisions faster, better, and maybe also much more efficient than in the past. But to bring people and your employees on board to work with the data in real time is also a completely different working. It's a different stress profile for employees if you can measure success in a minute or in a second.
How much money is Telefonica investing and educating employees for the digital future?
A significant amount. So we don't publish a number, but all our training is in that...
Millions? More than millions?
Yes, in that area. But I think it's important. It's also not about only money. It's also about giving access and explaining.
Sure.
On AI, I think we also discussed internally, how should we do that? Telefonica has given itself a charter of AI. What about the rules? What about the fundamentals? Because the potential we see there is enormous. But you also, on the other side, see the scarcity of people that are feared. What could all this data and this automation we do with algorithms do? But at the end of the day, it's about leadership in that and giving the right principles and acting very transparent. So insofar, I fully agree. We do not need a European master plan for that. I think it's about execution now, because we have all the assets we need in order to be successful.
Mm. And was already talking about the strength of Europe and the European industry. Where do you see chances for European companies to become more digital or a digital player like others in the global competition?
Mm-hmm. First, I'm going to say that I also agree we don't need a digital master plan.
Yes.
What we need is a vision for the future of Europe.
Yeah.
And I think absolutely critical is to mobilize our talent. Mm-hmm. So I would like to see like a vision for Europe and then a call to the talent. So innovators, startups, SMEs, like all the people, students, all the people that have talent, young people. We have a lot of unemployment, in particular where I come from, Italy, Spain, Portugal. People are very well educated, but they're not employed. Now, we need these people to build the future, the digital future of Europe. So we really need to incorporate this talent and to say, do you want to work on technology for the public good? Do you want to work on mission-oriented innovation to create the future of the society of Europe? Then you come here. And I think the set of values around rights, data protection, about privacy, about sovereignty, are really stimulating for people. And I think that is our advantage again. And in particular, one thing, I think Europe has a big chance in the next wave of innovation around decentralization and cryptography. Everybody talks about the blockchain. In this conference, not so much. Actually, that's good, away from the hype. But I think there is real talent there. And the talent is in Europe. So look at Switzerland. We have all this incredible fintech. We have a lot of people that are working on distributed ledger, large-scale decentralization, together with trust and agency and transparency. This is the future technology. And we have the talent here. Our universities, research centers, we have the best people working on privacy-enhancing technology that are going to solve the question around data security, cybersecurity, the real problems of our society. We have them here. So why don't we invest in that? And I think it's clear that with data, we have to do an effort into making sure that we propose a framework. People are talking about a national data fund. Why Europe doesn't do a European data fund, which is owned by the Europeans, by the European citizens, and then we have strict and competitive regulation to access this data so that the SMEs or cities or citizens can access it easier, and companies, the big companies in particular, the big monopoly companies, have to pay relative to the share of their profit. So this is an advantage for the AI startups in Europe. It is not a disadvantage. This is my point. Because now the debate is, well, China has it easy, they can gather, they have a dystopian system, they are social credit. Well, Europe doesn't like that. This is not a system that we can implement, but we can have quality data, secure data that will give competitive advantage to our AI startups. And this is very important to build the future of education, the future of transport, the future of basically our society. Healthcare. We saw healthcare is going to be disrupted, right? We have to build it here in Europe.
Manfred Weber, the EU just announced that it will be an investment of 20 billion euros investing in AI in the next years. Would you say there's a big plan? Is it big enough in comparison to other countries in the world?
It's never enough. I'm happy that we agreed now for the moment on our plan for Horizon, so our general investment in research. It's the biggest investment plan in research and innovation in this world. So we have a huge ambition behind as Europeans. And that is now agreed after the Austrian presidency between the representatives of the European Parliament and the Council members. That is already a good achievement, that we are ready for going a further step. But again, it's never enough, and it's always a problem of priorities. What are our key priorities when we distribute the money? Like in companies, it's the same about the priorities. If you allow me, because I have to apologize myself, I have to leave for my plane. But if you allow me, I want to add one final question. We speak a lot about the European dimension behind, because we all in this room understand that the national perspective will not in any way, let me say, give us a solution on the big challenges ahead of us. We all agree on this. But we wouldn't have the same debate here, like we have it here in Munich, in the same moment in London. No? Because in London they discuss totally different things. Having in mind that there are a lot of big brains there, a lot of creative people there in London, but they have totally different issues on the table. And what I want to tell you, in the year 2019, we speak here already on content, a lot of how to do it, how to make it innovative. I share all these points, but the key question for 2019 is whether we are still capable to deliver. Today, I'm a member of a European Parliament where we have 1/3 of the members of the European Parliament are populists or extremists who refuse the idea of compromise, of cooperation, of togetherness. And the worst case scenarios which we have on the table, for all the parties, it's not a party political thing, for all the parties, the worst case scenario which we have on the table is that in the next European Parliament we can face a situation where the extremists and the populists and the anti-compromise politicians will have a majority. That is real. Look to Italy, Salvini, Di Maio, look to Poland, look to France. That is the situation. And that's why, as a final remark, please allow me to underline that we have to go out of these rooms as well. But we have to do so. We have to convince people that the next European elections will be crucial about whether we can deliver in all of these points. We have to do it together. It's our common task.
But you're running out of time. We're talking about a few months left before when the elections are coming. So is there enough time to convince people?
Yes, I think so. I think people are getting aware about the elections only a few weeks before the elections. It's on national level, it's the same like on European level. So it's now the time to start. We are good. We are in the right moment. So let's do it now. And I regret absolutely what happens with the Brexit. I couldn't ever imagine that the Brits, you know, a country and people who are always very fact-based, who are perfect diplomats, ended up in such a chaotic political situation. So we regret the Brexit happening, but I must tell you that European-wide it helps me as a politician a lot. I tell people here in this country, in Germany, that the AfD is the German Brexit party, and if you follow the populists, you will get the same result. So that is what we have to do, to show people the alternative, and that means nationalism, egoism, and our idea is partnership and cooperation. That is my main message.
The last question on the Brexit, because you have to leave, I know. Will we see a hard Brexit, or is there any chance to have a new deal with the UK? What is your offer to Theresa May?
Today, Theresa May will present further ideas after the defeat of last week. The defeat was a very heavy defeat, so a very clear one. And frankly speaking, for me as an European politician, I'm dealing now since 2.5 years with the Brexit. On the one hand, I'm a little bit fed up with the debate because I want to talk about the future, not anymore about the past. That's only an emotional aspect. But the more important thing is that we cannot offer further things. The deal is on the table. It was an agreement among 28 governments. Imagine, 28 governments. 3 institutions in the European Union gave their consent to this agreement, and the Brits refused now. And that's why I think it's now the job of the Brits to give us a new idea what they want to achieve. Tell us what you want. Tell us what you want. Come to an agreement. Because that's a problem, that the British politicians cannot agree on one direction for the future. Europe has always the open-hand approach. We are always ready to compromise. But we need now, hopefully today, a clear idea what the British politics really wants to achieve.
That would be great, yeah, and helpful. Okay, thanks. You have to leave, yeah? Okay, Manfred, bye. Bye, take care, take care, yeah. So, come on, take that seat, please. So, if we have a look on the public debate about the digital future in Europe, that one is driven by fears and not by chances and optimism and courage and so on. Ulrich, we are a media specialist. Why is that so, and how can we change this public debate a little bit? Just a little bit. Just give us hope.
That's really a tough question. And if I had the answer, I would probably be doing something else. But I can just try to shoot at it. Optimism is needed always when you tackle the future, because based on fears, you will always end up with wrong solutions. So, first of all, I think we need a combination of the role of individuals, of startups, of many, many people who dare something, and on the other hand, of the role of the state, of parliaments, of democratic institutions. We have missed, I think, to define who we are in the digital world. We had the anything goes for a long time. We had a great disruption between, on one hand, established values in the analog media landscape, where it was quite clear that you couldn't get away over the long run with misinformation, fake news, and the like. There were things like accountability, responsibility, lawsuits, and so on. And on the other hand, in the public space, manifested in the digital world, other things were possible. So I always kept saying it was like it would be allowed to beat someone in the bus and forbidden in the tram. We had a breach in our values, and we have to overcome this. So I would urge us to really define which values we want to have in the digital sphere, and then we would have to look at which infrastructure is really allowing for these values. And if we see that, for instance, you can agitate in the most demagogic way, you can polarize societies, you can help disrupt democracies, then one track that we have to follow is regulation. But this is not enough, and it's also too defensive, I think. I would also try to establish an infrastructure based on European values, in addition to the American infrastructures that will be around for a long time. But we would be less dependent on these infrastructures of Facebook, Google, Amazon. And on the other hand, we could also try to make it better, to really create an infrastructure based on our values. And then we would invite many, many startups to create their own products. And then we would have a real competition, products based on the Google, Amazon, Facebook world, and we would have the European alternative. This will not happen overnight. This will not happen only on the initiative of startups, but what you need there is a framework, like, let's say, political will that has to be mobilized through politicians and parliaments. And it's a big invitation then for many who want to wage things, who want to endeavor, their own products, that they should do it on this infrastructure and not only on the American infrastructure.
Yes.
This is what my concept would be, and I think it can be done.
Okay. A few weeks ago, you were talking about European YouTube. Is that your biggest idea on that? Or?
It would be one product, of course. It could be one, and it's. I had a chance to talk to some of the really big minds that are gathered here for the DLD, and they said it's not completely utopian. We have the potential in Europe. We even have the money to do this. All it would need is to say it's really worthwhile, and you can rely upon the political will to last. It's not just, let's say, the mood of this year or next year, and then we will lose grip. But we will stay firmly with this concept, and Europe will certainly always be faithful to this alternative. And then I would say startup ideas will bloom and blossom. But it's sustainability that is needed.
Okay, okay. Thanks. Markus, where should Europe show more courage and more optimism? What would you say?
Well, I think, as we said, we all agree on a diagnosis that we need to act fast now. From this perspective, and we also know the strength that it's not one area that is becoming the Silicon Valley. We clearly need the pluralism in ideas and also the pluralism of regions that makes Europe strong. So insofar, the backbone on infrastructure, I think we now see that we can catch up. For example, in Spain, we have the best infrastructure in fiber throughout Europe. And they invested in a very deep crisis into a high-class fiber infrastructure. So I think let's learn also within Europe what really works well and adopt and lift and shift these ideas to other markets. I think in France, President Macron agreed not to auction spectrum for frequencies, to give the frequencies to the operators, and in return to really cover very, very rural areas in France with a superb mobile coverage. So I think these competition of good ideas in Europe will help us in order to foster, and that makes me optimistic that these ideas are winning because they bring Europe forward. As a CEO of a telecommunication company, how would you describe the infrastructure, the mobile infrastructure and technology infrastructure in Germany so far? Well, we are in a catch-up game currently. I think this has several reasons. I think in Germany we spent 60 billion euros for frequencies. So that was good for the Ministry of Finance in order to reduce debt. On the other side, this money is now missing because we can only spend the euro once. If you look to Spain or other countries in Europe, they have been more wise or more forward-looking that if the money is spent, it will most likely not have the fastest rollout in infrastructure. So there's another chance now for the government.
Right. The government doing the same mistakes again with the 5G auction?
Well, there are certain instruments. I think they can renew existing spectrum where have already been invested. I think this question is still open. There's an upcoming 5G auction being scheduled later in the year. Let's see how this plays out. But overall, the mechanism to auction frequencies, I think, is a model of the last century. I think if we want the best infrastructure, we should learn from China and other parts of the world, but also of the best companies in Europe, like Sweden, like Spain, like France now. So I think this is the ideas are there. I think it's about execution, focus, and the willingness to prioritize, because you can't have everything. If you want the best infrastructure, you have all the tools in your hand in order to prioritize on rollout and foster investments.
Francesca, how do you see the infrastructure topic?
Yeah, so I will again focus on the need to move away from critical infrastructure paid by the commercial manipulation and exploitation of personal data. So I think this is a big deal. Like, I think we want to have an alternative monetization strategy for online services that do not rely on the manipulation and exploitation of personal data. And I say that because I think it's absolutely critical, first of all, that with data we can generate public value, but also in revitalizing democracy, which is one core thing, because I think, you know, the vision, again, is not just a digital vision, but there's a vision about the society and the future of Europe. This participation, like democratic participation of citizens, there is no way back. This is happening online. I've been working on this topic for the last maybe 10 years or a bit less now. And we are seeing that, political parties, parliaments, cities, we all use digital infrastructure for civic participation. And people more and more, they are in contact with their political parties, with their politicians, with lawmakers, they express opinions, they vote online. I mean, this is really becoming a key critical infrastructure for democracy. And I think we cannot be surprised when we see, the Cambridge Analytica, data breaches, privacy violation, or where we see all this happening, because basically the business model of those companies, it is based on the manipulation and commercial exploitation of personal data. So we need an alternative there, and I think we need to have a European-wide democratic participation platform, maybe federated, based on data security, open source software, something that is European, and that's where we have to engage masses of citizens in redefining the future of Europe. Because again, I think this has to be bottom-up. We have to engage our citizens. This is also a difference of Europe. We are about democratic participation, which, by the way, I think is the only antidote or alternative to the right-wing nationalists. The fact that you can engage people. A lot of people, I see my country that was mentioned, Italy, as one of the populist danger. Well, I see a lot of people, they are now voting for the right-wing populists because they're just disenfranchised. They don't have trust. If they vote that way. But I mean, if you have an alternative of how to engage them to decide, about healthcare, about housing, about mobility, about things that matter to them, they will participate. And I mean, two things that are really dear to me is, of course, the plan about climate change and the Green New Deal. I think Europe has to be at the forefront of making that a reality and bringing together also the car industry. And even if we have our competitive advantage, we have to have an energy transition plan and make this very clear. I think the young generation need that. And also we need to put women power at the at the very front of the digital revolution. We have too few women engaged in this sector. I mean, I see it myself being a CTO of a big city. We need more women, and we need to empower and make visible the work of women in the digital revolution. So as you see, I mean, infrastructure is a big part, but I think we have to have a broader discussion on the agenda that we need.
What would you say? Why is it so complicated to create digital products by governments?
Exactly. Well, I mean, I'm a believer, of course, in public innovation.
Yes.
I work in the public sector. I think that the public should innovate because, if the public doesn't innovate, yes, also the private sector has a problem and society has a problem. And we see throughout the year how much public investment has gone into the key technologies that enable this digital revolution. Without an innovative public sector and an innovative state, we cannot do it. So I think, my work for 1 year in Barcelona has been working with the public officials, is a big organizational shift, is a big cultural change, and investing in education and digital skills, but also really bring people with you. We need a generational turnover, hire the young people in the public sector. We have to make the public sector sexy. People need to want to work for the public sector to innovate, and this is a great opportunity. So we need to make that an opportunity.
Yeah. Are you talking to the German government as well?
Yeah, well, with Berlin, and yes, I have also. Yes, I have.
Oh, you're in contact. Okay, good to know. So, Anne Mettler, again, the digital infrastructure, is it an advantage or disadvantage in Germany, Europe right now?
Well, it's a must-have.
It's a must-have, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I've been very surprised about how slow many countries have been about the adoption of 5G.
Yes.
Because what we, of course, have to understand is that essentially it's the infrastructure that will build the business models of the future. The example I always give to illustrate this, it's not a coincidence that Spotify was developed in Sweden, because Sweden was a very early adopter of super fast internet and broadband. And that was, of course, what was needed in order to stream music. So what I always tell the colleagues is, if Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify, had been born in another country, I can't, because I work in the public sector, I can't specify another country, but somewhere else, there would be no Spotify today. I mean, this is the reality. And I think that being so slow in giving others, South Korea, China, a competitive advantage is really not wise, because this is essentially what our industry needs to build the business models of the future. So this is an existential question, and I think we've been too slow. Let me also say that just the spectrum divided by countries is also a problem. Yes. So if we want to develop autonomous driving across Europe, how is it going to work? That your car slows, collapses at the border? So, I mean, what we put forward is essentially a Europe-wide auctioning, which was rejected by the member states precisely because they depend on the money. But if we had a Europe-wide auction, there is nothing that would say that you couldn't actually raise more money with it because it would be more valuable. This is in general one thing I have to say about the digital age. It's defined by two characteristics, speed and scale. And Europe has been too poor on both. Speed, it's been too difficult to scale up because of the fragmentation across Europe. And also scale has been impossible, because of the incompleteness of the single market. So I want to stress, it's not just a digital single market. There's also elements in the single market that don't work properly, so they need to be addressed. So speed and scale, if we can get it together on these two fronts, Europe has everything going for it. But we must hurry up, because in the United States and also in China, the completeness of these markets is a competitive advantage. And while in Europe, in principle, we have 500 million people, the reality is there's too much fragmentation, and this is what's slowing us down. So we have the good startups, but we don't have the successful scale-ups. Right. We finally must address this issue.
Yes. Yes, good. Manfred Weber's already gone, but I guess you know him pretty good. What is your answer to the not understanding of that topic in the European Parliament, not to have a fragmentation with a 5G standard in Europe and so on? Because it's crucial, as you mentioned.
So I need to be clear, this is not a comment about Manfred Weber. But in general, I would argue that Europe's politicians have been sometimes a little slow to understand this, And in fairness, I also have to say that industry has also sometimes been pretty slow, because they should have seen a lot of this coming and didn't. So, the point that I made earlier about adoption and diffusion of technologies, I mean, this is companies' fault. That's not public policy. In general, in Europe, everyone always looks to politicians and to public policy to solve everything. I think this is a mistake. I don't think politicians, politicians are known to not really be ahead of the curve on technological developments. So I think it really is a mistake to always look to public policy and to just try to get on in the system that we do have and try to come. It is exactly, here I will agree with Manfred Weber, that usually people come and say, keep markets closed, keep them fragmented, you believe it or not. I mean, this is exactly, there's no one coming saying, open these markets, make it more streamlined, because the fact is that a lot of companies are benefiting from closed markets and from protectionism. So I think there is much that we need to address at the European level. And I do think what I see now, and also with Manfred Weber, there is a new generation that does understand the urgency of this in a way that maybe is missing from those that are of a more mature generation. So that at least is a good first step. Also, if you look at leaders like Emmanuel Macron, sure, or Kurz in Austria. So things are happening, and don't ever give up on Europe, because if we don't play and we don't make the digital sphere better, then we have the status quo. We have what we see around us, and I think no one is that enchanted with that at this current moment.
Yes, you were talking about speed and scale for that infrastructure, and that term, is it right, or is it good to prohibit the use of Huawei products in the 5G
I cannot comment on it, but I will say that the future, the digital infrastructure, is essentially everything, because we know that in the future, everything will be connected with everything. I mean, every device is going to be connected. So it is something to consider. I mean, if we, for instance, thought about every bridge or road or airport or port would be in the hands of non-European operators, I think it would raise some questions. So All I'm saying is we need to have this discussion. It is long overdue.
Yeah.
Long overdue that we have this, and I have been, if I can end with this, been very surprised that in this country that has been so strong on data privacy, it has taken this long to have a serious discussion about security of infrastructure and data security.
Markus, what would you add to that point, data security on the network, especially to use Huawei products or not to use them?
Well, overall, Europe has been very strong in defining the mobile standard in the world. 20 years ago is a long time. I think the GSMA standard was exported from Europe to the whole world and was the beginning of the mobile revolution as we know it today. I think we lost a little bit traction, and key innovation is now driven in our industry in China, not in Europe anymore. I think that's a shame, because the whole mobile journey started here in Europe, coming from one standard and having the vision that the world needs one mobile standard in order to be connected. We lost that traction. I think we are now catching up. There are great European companies who are now defining also the 5G world in Europe, and I think this is what we need to foster. On the other side, clearly, Europe is open. We use global products also in our rollout and also in our networks. But clearly, we shouldn't be naive. I think we need to evaluate carefully, also taking 5G decisions, which technology we use, and that we get the guarantees and the certainties that we really can provide secure networks to our people, but especially also to our companies in order to protect their R&D.
Would you agree?
Yeah, to some extent. I think coming from a traditional media company, what we always have to make sure in the 5G world is the free access to information. And maybe we need also public-private partnerships to ensure this, so that we do not have an infrastructure that leads then to another kind of de facto monopoly between those who are in charge of the infrastructure and those who then add the content to it. But I think it's quite certain that this will be the key infrastructure for the future, mobile internet based on 5G. Broadcast can help some. We have an interesting technical project going on around Munich with the help of my company, Telefonica, I think, and some other companies, showing that you can add even elements of broadcast technology to the 5G technology standard. But my point is really not a technical one, but I come from a value-based context. My concern is, to repeat it once more, how can we prevent that democracy is being disrupted? We see so many countries around us more and more polarized, a split in countries that never thought this would be possible. Sweden, for instance, a country of consensus, very classical, and now they also have this kind of split. And this has to do also with the way we communicate. If the business models do not refer also to values, like how can we live together peacefully? How can we sort of always try to strive for tolerance? If we really go for this polarization, that algorithms steer visibility according to alike minds, kindred spirits, people who think I want to be comfortable in a community that thinks just as I do. And less and less all these different bubbles have a connection, then we are facing big, big problems. So my invitation is, will the American companies change this? They talk a lot about it, especially here in Munich over the weekend, but we have to see yet whether this is serious. And I wouldn't trust only upon them, but I would also try to take this into our own hands, come up with a concept that is really safeguarding the way we live together in Europe, and the way we did this in peace and stability over the last decades is really unheard of in the world and also in Europe. Much is at stake. And then we would need technical questions, how to build the cloud 2.0 with more than 100 different components, and also who is safeguarding the independence and the quality of the content. And the big misunderstanding would be to say that content will have to be controlled by the state. No way. But what has to be made sure by the state is that the framework safeguards quality content, safeguards the fighting of disinformation, of fake news, and so forth. Just like it's a classical regulatory issue over centuries, how to safeguard that not the liars, the most effective liars, wins the contest, but that it's really always speech, counter-speech, giving the full picture of all the arguments at stake, and then people can make up their minds themselves. And to leave consumers and citizens and voters the choice, but they need the full selections of what is there, and not just a narrow fraction of what is tailor-made for this community, as opposed to another community which gets a completely different argument and information. That's not going to work.
At the end, I think, good answer. At the end, do we have to redefine capitalism at all?
Well, if, let's say...
It's a big question, but...
Yeah. I agree. To just put it in one sentence,
that would be good.
If a business model would really be successful, neglecting or even fighting or disrupting democracy, then for me, that's not a legitimate end. And I would really then say we have to regulate capitalist means in an example like this.
If I can just add to that, sure. I mean, there's talk now of, in the future, democracies coming together to develop technology standards, precisely because it is dawning on us that a lot of the existing technologies is actually used to undermine democracies. So what is at stake here is not just economy, it is our very societal model. And I agree, we need to rethink pretty much everything. The EU is doing it. We have a code of practice for the online platforms to try to hold them to account. Everyone here should know that you will be bombarded about lies and misperceptions about the EU as we get closer to the European Parliament elections. And the goal is to completely disorient you, to not know anymore what's true, what's not true. And so the point is not just more regulation, we need that, but also for us to build up resilience, to know that there are people who are trying to polarize, and not just people, it's bots, it's trolls. And here is one thing I want to say, is it's always about freedom of speech, right? This is why we are not allowed to do anything on the side of policymakers. But if you consider that so much of what is on social media today bots and trolls, so machines and people paid to put out all this poison and lies, then I say that they don't have the same right to freedom of speech as everyone in this room does. And I think we need to become much more discerning about what is going on social media, because it is a formidable threat to our democracy and our way of life and freedom and everything that we thought we could take for granted. But I can tell you today, unfortunately, we can no longer take for granted.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks. Good. Francesca.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that data sovereignty is actually like freedom of speech in the digital age. And I think this concept that you're talking about, I think it can be summarized with digital sovereignty for Europe. I think we have to start talking more about that, take back democratic control and democratic management of digital platforms, and in particular, give back the control of data to citizens. I mean, I'm a very strong advocate of this because we don't want to see, is data being controlled by the big tech or by the state? I don't think that citizens will accept that data is controlled by the state. I think we have to come up with a different model that gives back the control of data to citizens. So it's the citizen that can decide what data I want to keep private, what data I want to share, with whom, and on what terms. And the terms have to be set in a democratic and accountable way, not by in an opaque way where you don't have transparency about who is accessing your data, for what, how is manipulated. And I think this is a new social pact on data that we are going to rewrite in Europe. I'm pretty sure about that. And not only the pact, but we're going to make it work. In Barcelona, we already have a project, it's called Decode, funded by the European Commission as one flagship project about distributed ledger. And we use encrypted data, decentralized infrastructure, where citizens can have this interaction and decide about their data and share their data in a secure way to improve transportation, to improve healthcare and mobility. And this is really working, and we see more sharing of data than less sharing of data. So I think these kind of projects are practical, they're real, and we can make them work.
Markus, as a manager, how do you see that discussion on that point?
I think Telefonica has given itself its rule, giving back the data to the customer so they can decide not only in Europe, also in other parts of the world where Telefonica operates. It's part of our vision, because I think it's so important to have this transparency and giving our data back to customers, and with technologies it's possible to do that. It's very easy that customers really have the full choice what happens to their data, but also happens with data that are anonymous. I think it's very important, and I think it's a differentiator. It will become a big differentiator once it comes to trust. Because in all this world we live now, trust will become maybe the most important currency, whom you really trust and what is going to happen with your data.
We're running out of time, but John, was just one last question to all of you. Coming back to the technology future of Europe, where can Europe become world-class in the digital world? Just a short answer if you have something in mind to give something optimism at the end.
I think the ethical approach to AI is promising, but I will say if we want to go that way, we need to create the market for ethical AI, and we need to create the demand. Because if I look at the GDPR, it's great, but the fact is we don't have a single sizable data company in Europe. So if we want to go the ethical AI way, we need to create markets, we need to create demand, not just in Europe, but worldwide.
Ethical AI, okay, thanks. Francesca, what is your opinion?
I think people will, like Europe will build the human-centric, rights-based framework for the digital society and infrastructures that will be an alternative to the, let's say, surveillance and commercial data monopolies from the US and the social credit system in China. And this will be a more democratic, decentralized, and empowering alternative.
Okay.
That's a positive vision.
It's a positive, yes, absolutely.
I think Europe is and will become the most admired place, because how we treat data and how transparent we are, I think is or should be a role model in the world also going forward. If you see what happens in China, how data are used in order to rule the society, I think Europe has a great chance to become the most admired place in the world.
Okay, wonderful. Last, I think.
I agree. And I would advocate to combine the different perspectives that we have at the issue, from technical people, from lawmakers, from startup and business, and also maybe from philosophers. Might be needed.
Okay, thank you for that inspiring, thoughtful, and optimistic discussion here. Oh, thanks.